All right, looks like we have settled down on the waiting room, although I'll continue to watch it. Do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good. Hi everyone. We're gonna do like introductions in a little bit, so I won't do that yet, but welcome to this STAR workshop where we'll be talking about how to get involved in research and what to do if you can't find a position this year. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide, Cindy. Great. And then if this is your first STAR Scholars workshop, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat. If you all could just fill out this survey. It's a really quick one, just kind of asking about, yeah, what university you go to and things like that. And then, yeah, cool. So then we'll do introductions. And since I'm already talking, I'll just continue. So my name's Eric. I'm a fourth year PhD candidate in the Psychology and Women's and Gender Studies program. I study how media and celebrities in the media impact the gender beliefs of boys and young men of color. I think I've been with STAR for like, how long is it, Cindy? Like a year and a half, maybe?
About a year and a half, I think. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
this is your
yeah.
second, full year, but you worked with us over the summer too.
Yeah, definitely. So super excited to be here. Yeah, and tell you all a little bit more about my journey in California. But yeah, I'll get into that later. Yeah, I guess I'll popcorn. Do you want to go, Bree?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna. I also go by Bree. I am a fourth year PhD student in the combined program in education and psychology, also known as CPEP. And I, broadly speaking, am interested in improving climate of K-12 schools to create safe spaces for students of all backgrounds. And this is my first year with STAR. I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
I think that leaves me. So hi, everyone. I'm Maddie. I am also a fourth year PhD candidate in the cognition and cognitive neuroscience area of the psych department. Also kind of broadly, my research focuses on studying how implicit information about distracting information might be useful in helping people prevent distraction and being captured by irrelevant information, and specifically in ADHD. This is also my first year in STAR, and I'm really excited to be here with you all.
Cool. So let me go ahead and run through the agenda for us. So first, we're going to start off with just some presentation norms. So just like, I guess, how to conduct ourselves on Zoom. And then we'll go over kind of a program overview for the STAR Scholars program. There's also an upcoming deadline in November. So if you're a University of Michigan student and want to apply, and if you're eligible to apply, we'll talk about that. Then we'll go into traditional research involvement. And finally, what to do if you're not able to find any opportunities. Great, so some presentation norms. So please use mute except when you're speaking. I'm sure you all are somewhat familiar with Zoom now that we're like, I don't know, very far into the pandemic, but it can get kind of wild if everyone's trying to talk at the same time. And then sometimes, like you'll overhear someone doing their Starbucks order or something like that. And yeah, it can get kind of rough. So in addition to that, you can use the chat to ask questions and make comments during the presentation. The person speaking might not always get to those immediately, but we'll do our best. And then, yeah, if we go over something and you do have a question, you don't want to put in the chat if you want to speak, please use the raise hand function. Yeah, that should be, if you click on the reactions little button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, it should allow you to raise your hand. And then, yeah, if possible, and if you're comfortable doing so, it'd be great if y'all had your cameras on during the discussion. That way we can see y'all's faces. Kind of gives, yeah, more of a sense of like, we're actually talking with people here rather than just like a screen. So yeah, it would be great to see y'all's faces if you're able to, yeah, turn your cameras on. All right, great. So jumping into what the STAR Scholars program is. So STAR actually stands for Students Tackling Advanced Research. But I mean, there's a lot of ways you can use the acronym. So what we try to build through STAR is scholarship, transferable skills, academics, and research. So even though it says academics, we also, yeah, we try to provide these skills that would allow you to potentially go into non-academic fields as well. So yeah, that's what that stands for. So yeah, we try to provide that for all students that join the program, and then even people that just attend the workshops. So some more specific goals are to prepare students to be researchers, to provide some structured mentoring, increase the number of students conducting advanced research, and academically support an inclusive community of students. So yeah, that's very important to us. Coming from like a non-research one university, not everyone is aware of research opportunities. So it's important for us to get that information out there. And then, yeah, for marginalized communities, a lot of the times we have like lower numbers of engaging in research as well. So some of the benefits if you apply and if you're accepted in the program, you get mentoring by a current graduate student, you get informational panels, skill workshops, you are able to participate in scientific talks and discussions, and then you're also able to build relationships with the people that you're in the program with. So that's faculty, grad students, other undergraduate students. Yeah, so it's a really great program. But yeah, the overall goal again is to prepare you with research skills so that you can be competitive for landing a research position, applying to grad school, or again, so non-academic jobs, industry, private sector job market. Yeah, so it's really just getting you ready for those skills, and depending on where you're at, like in your college career, it could be early on and getting you some of those early research skills. And then if you're later on, we also try to provide some support for applying to grad school or helping you in your next steps. Great, so now going over eligibility. So the program is kind of dedicated towards helping students with historically underrepresented backgrounds in research. So that includes first generation students, international and undocumented students, racial and ethnic minority students, sexual orientation and gender minority students, or students that have experienced financial hardship, and those who have demonstrated a commitment to diversity. So you don't necessarily have to meet all of these eligibility requirements, but meeting a few is good. Again, that's what the program, or those are the students that we're seeking to help throughout the program. And yeah, so for admissions criteria, we're looking for good academic performance, and then potential overlap with psych. We are posted in the psych department, being currently enrolled in classes, a strong interest in research. Yeah, interested in pursuing psych or biopsych research, the pursuit of a graduate program, desire for mentorship. So again, when we talked about like the benefits of it, you'd be being mentored by a current PhD student. So yeah, like me, Maddie, or Bree. And then as far as years in college, oh yeah, Cog Psych is also eligible. Yeah, so we're specifically dedicated towards helping freshmen, sophomore, and junior students. Again, because we want to help you all get that early research experience or be able to help you all in transitioning from undergrad to grad school. It's important that you're in there, because if you're already a senior and applying, there's not as much we can do. So yeah, for freshmen through juniors. So yeah, if that sounded good to you, or if you've attended a couple workshops and you think the program is a good fit, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link for the application. Again, I think it was mentioned in there, but if it wasn't, you have to be a University of Michigan student. And yeah, it'll tell you a little bit more about the application. If you click on that link, the deadline is November 4th, so it's coming up a little bit. Yeah, pretty wild that we're almost at the end of the year. But yeah, keep an eye out on that if you're interested in applying. All right, now I'll go ahead and hand it off to Bree. We'll start talking about, yeah, some of the research stuff.
Awesome, thanks, Eric. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what traditional research involvement looks like as an undergraduate student. So why get involved in research? How do you even figure out what you're interested in researching? How do you define your interests? Some different types of involvement, and then what once you've identified all of those things. So some benefits of research involvement: you're creating knowledge for the world. You are researching things to put knowledge out into the world, to inform, how people make decisions, policies. You can build transferable skills. Like Eric mentioned, we want to provide skills that not only are applicable to the academic space, but also other workspaces, such as team building and mentorship. Look competitive for grad school. So especially if you're thinking about getting your PhD, research experience is pretty important to have in undergrad. Establish and grow your network, build confidence, refine your interests and goals, and much more. So identifying your research interests. So these are some questions you might want to consider as you think about what kind of research you might want to be involved in. And it might take you, a little bit to figure out what's a great fit for you. When it comes to research, you might, if you have the opportunity to explore different interests, maybe go to a couple different lab meetings. It might take a little bit to find what's a good fit for you. But to start, maybe think about what topics, classes, and instructors have stood out to you. What questions did you still wonder after you left class? What are topics or conversations that you enjoy having with your classmates? What's your dream career? What are your hobbies? Do you want to work as part of a team or individually? Do you want to work with humans, animals, or something else when it comes to research? So those are just a few questions. So there's different types of traditional research involvement. So there's, of course, in-person research. There's virtual research. So in-person research might be necessary if you are working with kids in schools, for example, like traveling to the school to do some interviews with kiddos. Your research might also allow you to conduct interviews virtually if that's something that a lot of folks had to adopt a transition to conducting research virtually during the pandemic and things. Human subjects research, so learning about people, surveying people. Animal research might be more learning about biology in the brain, for example, and meta-analysis. So that could be if a faculty has compiled a lot of research, maybe they'll bring you in to do a meta-analysis to look at all that research and identify themes, like maybe, like this is missing, or this is something that's really common in this literature, those sorts of things. So some research you can do for credit. For school, you can get I'm sure psychology has independent research that you can enroll in and as if it were a course, and you can get course credit. There's volunteer, paid, etc. So when should you get involved in research? There are many different times and opportunities to participate in research, depending on your interests and the type of research conducted in your interest area. So biopsychology, cognitive science, etc. These dates or opportunities may change for you, and your involvement may change or differ depending on which area of research you're interested in. So again, for instance, if you're interested in child behavior, in observing kids during the school year, you might collect data during the academic school year and then use the summer months to do data analysis. Generally, though, there's research opportunities during the semester, so fall, winter. You often can do 2 semesters at a time or only 1 semester, and even summer semesters, there may be opportunities. Luckily, there are also summer research programs for those that may not be able to participate in formal research during the school year, whether it be because of course load or limited availability of positions. Eric and I actually participated in a summer research program together at the University of Michigan called SROP in 2018, and we go way back. That's how we know each other. So yeah, fun fact. So keep in mind that responsibilities will vary with experience. When you're first starting out in research, Your responsibility might simply just be showing up to lab meeting and getting used to the culture of the lab. You might have meetings with older or more advanced lab members to kind of learn if your lab uses like fMRI or MRI software, for example. You might need some training in that sort of thing. Lab meeting attendance may be expected. That might be weekly lab meetings, for example, virtual or in person, depends on the lab. Experience in the lab could result in a senior or honors thesis. So that's an opportunity that could present itself, and then that thesis could result in getting a publication or presentation, which are great opportunities.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Bree. Yeah, that's wild. We were in a summer research program, I guess 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago now. It was in 2018. So yeah, it's been a minute. So kind of going along with the stuff that Bree was saying, it's also important when you're considering a research position to make sure you have time for it in your schedule, or that you make time for it. Oops. Yeah. Or that you make time for it. I think Jerry, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Jerry. But yeah, so you don't want to kind of start a research experience if you don't have the time for it, because then you might get like a bad rep in the department or something like that, and you don't want to like burn those bridges. But yeah, so if you decide that you are interested in research, which most likely you are if you're here at this workshop, but yeah, if you decide that's something for you, then there's a lot of ways you can go about finding research positions. So one is visiting your psych department website. So usually this involves, I mean, for University of Michigan students and other students, you could just type in whichever university you're at, look for the psychology department. Usually if you click on there, some websites will have like different labs and you're able to directly see the research that's being conducted. Other ones you can click on faculty profiles and you'll look through there. But you can also look in departments outside of psychology. So if there is, so say you're interested, so I mean, for Bree, she's also in an education program. So if you feel like your research overlaps with a certain area, you could also check out the education website. Depending on the university that you're at, there can be like a lot of interdisciplinary work. So even if it's not psych research, it could overlap with psych research. And yeah, I mean, Cindy will talk about this later, but if you're not able to find a position that's directly related to your research, that's okay. There are a lot of research skills that are transferable. So you can start off in a lab that maybe doesn't do what you want, but you can use those skills to then like leverage your application to another lab. Oops, sorry. So yeah, so in addition to that, oh, sorry, I kind of just actually said all that. So then you could also talk to instructors. And I know depending on your class sizes, this might be more difficult. I went to a state university, so we only had like 30 to 40 students in classes. But if you're in like a 300, 400 student, like huge lecture, that might be more difficult. But you can talk to your GSIs as well. Typically, actually, GSIs are the ones that are recruiting people to work in the lab. So a lot of times you'll have a GSI oversee you and they'll be recruiting research assistants. And you could also talk to your peers. So if you have like a friend or something that is doing research, you can always talk to them like, hey, how did you get that position? Or they might even be recruiting in their lab. So you can definitely get creative about looking for these positions. And then, yeah, so we also have resources. So you attending this is kind of getting information on that. And I think, so I mean, obviously the pandemic has had a lot of negative impacts on people being able to get research positions, but it also has opened up some other avenues. So if you are looking at like other universities that you're not necessarily a part of, some faculty are taking students, yeah, from other universities. So usually the way that I find out about those things is through like Twitter. So if you're on academic Twitter and you follow faculty on there, sometimes they'll have postings for that. But yeah, try to be creative. Even if you have like friends at other universities that are involved in research, you can reach out to them. But yeah, also be realistic. So, if you're thinking about grad school and stuff like that, like you're not necessarily gonna jump onto a project and like, cool, like I have a publication like in a semester or something like that. It definitely takes time. So, be patient about people reaching back out to you. And even if people aren't accepting research assistants currently, if you let them know that you're still interested, they might be able to reach back out to you when they do have positions that are open. Yeah, and then consider the big picture. So again, even if, for example, like the research you're engaging in isn't directly related to your interest currently, it's really important to have those skills, and you could use those in a lot of different areas. Cool. So this is a real life example. This is, yeah, like what my research journey was at. So like I was saying, I wasn't from a research intensive university. I'm from a Cal State. So what that means is kind of there's more of a balance between like teaching and research. And I think, yeah, we don't necessarily have as many programs that are telling you from the jump, like, hey, get involved in research. Like I feel like at R1 universities like Michigan and other universities are kind of like, hey, like you're expected to get involved in research, or it's really common. So we didn't really have that. So yeah, for my freshman year, I was just taking classes. I was working a retail job at Tilly's, if y'all know where that is, kind of like, or not where that is, but what that is, kind of like PacSun or Zoomies. Yeah, and summer I had fun. Not to say that research isn't fun, but I want to say, yeah, like the freshman year, like that's the only like real summer I had where it was like, you know, like when you're a kid, elementary school, it's like, wow, like summer is all mine except for, you know, maybe some workbooks and stuff like that. So yeah, I wasn't really doing anything school related that summer. Yeah, and there's not many takeaways from that. So I was unaware of any research opportunities. I actually went in, maybe like many of you all did that are interested in psych. I went in thinking I was going to be like a therapist or a counselor. But yeah, that ended up changing along my journey. So once I was a sophomore, again, I was still taking classes. I don't know, I was going to say a cooler job, but I don't know if it's cooler. It paid more, which was nice. So I started working as a bank teller at Wells Fargo. And that's actually where I got my first research opportunity. I tend to ramble when I tell stories, so I don't want to jump too far into it. But ironically, it was actually one of my customers. He used to come in for like quarters for laundry, and he was a professor at the university. And then we started talking about his research, and then yeah, somehow I was just like, hey, like I want to be a part of that. That sounds cool. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think that's like super common for you to find a research opportunity that way, but you never know. So that's what happened with me. And then as I started getting like more serious about research, I was able to join this like academic program called McNair. This was like a summer prep academy. So they told us, they kind of introduced us to like research and the different types of things that are necessary to get into graduate school. So yeah, I mean, through my whole academic career, I really gained a lot of help from these programs, again, that were targeting underrepresented students. So yeah, my takeaways from sophomore year, I was able to contribute to like an ongoing project. That was my first exposure to research. And that's when I really started thinking about graduate school. Again, graduate school in the sense that it's like more focused on research. If I wanted to be a counselor, I would still have to go to graduate school, but this was kind of, yeah, again, looking at research focused programs. So then my junior year, again, still taking classes, and here I actually made a transition from, you know, these other jobs that I was working that were non-academic. And again, like I mentioned earlier, like it doesn't always have to be directly related to your interest when you're doing research. So I actually picked up a job at an educational research center on campus. I don't do anything with education now. It was like interesting tangentially, but I wasn't like that wasn't like really my passion or what I was interested in, but I knew getting those research skills was important. So yeah, I actually took a pretty sizable like pay cut going from Wells Fargo to this research center. But since I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, it was important. And I kind of just like, I was like, all right, like I got to do it. You know, if I got to eat ramen for like my whole junior year, it's okay. No, I'm just playing. I wasn't eating ramen every day, just like 2 to 3 days. Also kidding. Yeah, so then in addition to that, like, so then I was kind of in this like research hub. So that's another good thing about jumping into a research experience, like we were mentioning earlier, like you start talking to other people doing research, faculty, grad students, etc. So yeah, I ended up going into the McNair program, so like the formal program, not necessarily the summer thing. And with that, I was actually able to conduct independent research with a faculty member. That's just part of the program. And then during the summer, I actually joined this other program called Maximizing Access to Research Careers. So essentially, I was just like a really big nerd in undergrad, and like you kind of have to be to get into graduate school. But I'm pretty sure I overdid it because I definitely like burnt out super hard at the end of my undergrad career. Um, I think you can get into grad school without doing all of these things. I mean, definitely some of them, but yeah, try to take it easy on yourselves. Yeah, and that kind of further solidified my decision to go into grad school. And so I was actually a super senior in my undergrad. I took 5 years, but I couldn't fit all 5 years on here. So for my senior year, I had like wrapped up my McNair project and then started up on my Mark project. And yeah, that summer is when Bree and I were in the summer research opportunity program. So yeah, with that, that was like a bunch of graduate school preparation, professional development, more research experiences. And I think throughout this, one of the big threads was just like talking to as many people as possible about that, especially when I was at the University of Michigan, trying to make as many connections as possible. Yeah, and I mean, to some extent, like by participating in these workshops, like you're engaging with the University of Michigan. So definitely take advantage of that. And yeah, reach out, follow up with people that you see presenting. But yeah, so that was my journey. Cool. And then, yeah, so some other resources, kind of like you can go through this list. Honestly, if you just type in any of these things on Google, something should pop up. Yeah, a lot of people kind of joke around a bit about like being a grad student. And like one of the things is you get really good at Googling. And I mean, you might think like, oh yeah, like it's cool. I know how to Google. Obviously, you just type some words in, press enter. But yeah, like I think you get very good at like finding what you want to find. So just specifics. So again, even if you type in, I just typed it in earlier, it was like summer research programs for undergraduates in psychology, and you'll get like a huge list. So there's some like larger programs that'll kind of provide you like a list of universities that are doing this program. And there's some like very specific individual ones. So like, so I was interested in the University of Michigan in my undergrad. So like I looked them up and looked at their programs. If you have this university that you think you really want to go to, it would definitely be worthwhile to, yeah, check out their website, see if they offer some sort of summer research experience. Great. And then, so I used to love email templates as an undergrad. I was very bad at emails like early on. Every so often I'd like go back and I'd come across an email that I sent to a faculty member and I was like, wow, that's like really bad. Like, I'm surprised they replied to me. So we have this beautiful template here for you to reach out if you're trying to get a research experience with somebody. And yeah, this could be sent to faculty. It could also be sent to GSIs. But yeah, so basically I won't read through it because I know y'all can read, but it has these areas where you can just plug in. So yeah, your professor, you would put your professor's name. And yeah, you want to try to make it as personalized as possible. So the good thing about a template is it's like a lot easier, right? But one of the negatives can be just you sending like the same emails to like a bunch of people and then sometimes forgetting to change the names. You don't want that to happen. So make sure you spend some time really explaining why you're interested in that lab or their research. Yeah, and then if you have a CV, I don't know if we've already done the CV resume workshop or if we do one of those for this semester. Oh, we don't. Okay. But if you happen to have one of those, you could definitely attach it. It's a nice way for them to kind of see from the jump some of your experiences. And then, yeah, if you don't have any experience or a CV or resume, you can also explain that in there. And then, yeah, there's also this blurb at the bottom that kind of talks about the pandemic, but also, yeah, sorry, lost my train of thought. But yeah, it also, yeah, just talks about if they don't have an opportunity available, that ideally they can point you to other opportunities. Cool, all good.
Sorry, my bad. I was trying to put something into the chat for you guys and my cursor went off of the chat window, not to the
No, you're good. I thought that was
presentation.
like a Eric, you're talking way too long. Like, let's go.
No, that was my fault.
You're all
The
good.
space was supposed to go into the chat window and not into the Google. So as long as I've jumped in, so two things I do just want to emphasize from what Eric is saying. So one is on the CVs. What I was going to type in the chat is that this is another place where Google can help. So if you just Google put together a psych student CV, you'll get a lot of resources for that. The other thing that I just wanted to note is sort of like really the bottom of this email is also important, because especially like there tend to be fewer positions open in the winter than there are in the summer or in the fall. And so if you're trying to get into a lab now, but you can't, like if if they do let you start showing up to lab meetings and you do so consistently, and you stay involved on the lab, like, in that sort of peripheral manner, when we do have an opening, then you're more likely to be the person who's sort of at the top of our minds to be admitted to the lab. So again, if they can't give you a position now, see if there's some other way that you can stay in contact with the lab. Right, now we need to advance. So do we need a break? So I guess raise your hands if you feel like you need a break, or we can go on. All right, looks like we can carry on here. So a lot of you, and this kind of, Eric's part segues nicely into this, well, what happens if I don't find something? As Eric was saying, there are more positions open now than there were during the pandemic, but it's still a little bit difficult. And I know sometimes it can be a little discouraging. And sometimes it can kind of feel like, well, I'm applying for these positions and I don't have any experience, but in order to get experience, I need to have a job. And so how am I supposed to make this work out? So don't panic. There's lots of different ways that you can start to build your skills and make yourself a good candidate for things. And you probably have some experience that you may not even think of as being related to research. So one thing I was thinking of, when Eric was talking about his summer positions working at Tilly's, or especially the one working at Wells Fargo, I started off, my first summer was working as a temp office assistant. So going around to all these different offices and, basically being a secretary or being a receptionist. And, probably fortunately for me, like I'm old and TikTok didn't exist then. And so there's a lot of downtime in these jobs. So I would just do, Microsoft Office tutorials or some other software tutorial and build up those skills. Those are actually things that are incredibly useful for lab experience or for any kind of work experience. So the easiest step is, don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't just think of one type of research or one type of work experience. And also research happens a lot outside of the psychology department. So you also want to take a look at research institutes. So we have the Institute for Social Research here. We have psychiatry. I also collaborate with people in neurology. You could also take a look, sometimes there's city or state programs. So there's one that's sort of affiliated with Michigan, but is also sponsored by the state of Michigan. And they actually have hired 2-star alumni to work with them on this outreach program for older adults, and they're doing psychological assessments with them. You may also find private research groups. Research experience from one topic area can apply to another. So even if you're working in an accountant's office and they ask you to run records on something, that is still experience that can end up being helpful because you've learned how to use this software, you've learned how to run reports, you've learned how to organize these things and be proactive on your own. So don't discount that kind of experience for yourself. So research really is supposed to be translational. So we say bed to bedside because people often think of the translation out to the medical realm, but it's also translational to other business realms. So actually some of the grad students were talking about before we started the session here about what they're thinking about doing after graduation, and not everybody necessarily wants to become a professor. Some people want to go work for Facebook. Some people want to go be a consultant. So it really goes both ways. Likewise, research with lab animals can open the door for human research and vice versa. I definitely have worked with a couple students in my lab who've had some animal training and some human training, and it's a lot of work to do both, but it actually is very helpful for getting a deeper understanding of both. Again, you can also do a lot of independent skill building. And here I would say, you don't just, it can feel like, oh, well, there's a lot of stuff out there. What should I learn? Don't do it randomly. Take a look at the kinds of positions that you think you would find interesting and see if they list the qualifications. Or if you see something, and you feel like I'm probably not what they're looking for now, sometimes you can email, especially if there's a lab manager or a grad student who's running it and saying, I don't think I'm ready to apply for this now, but this sounds like the kind of thing that I would be really interested in doing in the future. Can you give me some ideas on like how I might best prepare or what kinds of skills you all would be looking for? There's lots of new things that happen. And also anytime you're learning a skill, it's gonna feel hard at first. It's okay. Don't let that discourage you. I think most of the grad students in here can tell you the first time and sometimes even the second time that they took statistics, it felt really hard, but you get used to it and you sort of get over that initial learning curve. Another thing that'd be really helpful is if you want to learn a skill, and especially if you're trying to do it with an online course or doing it on your own instead of like a course that you're registered for, is find somebody else to take it with you or who's taking another course at the same time, and keep each other accountable. So one thing that some of the undergrads in my lab used to do is they would kind of give each other challenges on things that they wanted to learn. And we literally had, just like you do in kindergarten, the little star system up on the filing cabinet in the lab. And if you put in your hour of skill building for that week, then you got the little star on there. But if you didn't, then you had to buy coffee for everybody else in the group that week. SMART goals. So this is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time limited. Again, because we are also time limited, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but this is basically a way to help keep yourself organized and accountable. And this is another thing, like if this sounds like something that you could use to help you break down a big task into smaller ones that make it feel more achievable, this is another place where Google can help you. There's a lot out there on that. So this would be something like break something down into things like 30 minutes of Code Academy a day, as opposed to learn to code. The other thing is that sometimes people come out of sessions like this and they feel very excited and they they feel very excited and revved up and want to start everything all at once. If you do that, as Eric was saying, you'll get burned out. Pick one or two things that seem really interesting and kind of catch your attention, or are sort of easy to keep yourself motivated on. And go deep on those as opposed to trying to start a bunch of new things at once. So you don't want to get overwhelmed, then you feel burnt out and you stop doing it, then you feel bad because you stop doing it, and then you start avoiding it. So it's much better to pick one small thing that you can really learn well and feel good about than trying to do everything at once. And likewise, success isn't guaranteed. Sometimes you're going to get stuck. Be kind to yourself, and also don't be afraid to reach out for help. Like even if you're doing an independent skill, sometimes ask your professors, ask your GSIs and say, hey, I'm trying to learn how to program something in CyclePy, or I'm trying to learn more about Qualtrics and I'm really stuck on this. Do you know of anybody who can help me? And there's usually lots of resources, and as Eric was saying, we all have to learn these things on our own too. And so it's very likely that we run into that problem and have some resources we can point you to. In terms of picking things out, check the method sections from the papers of the lab that you're interested in and see what they're using. So, a lot of times people will say, we analyzed the data in SPSS, or we collected the surveys using Qualtrics. And if you write an email to a professor and you say, so I noticed that you used such and such program in your lab, and I'm really interested in becoming to work there. And so I've gone and done this LinkedIn learning certification for that. That will definitely catch somebody's attention. For somebody with these technical skills, it can help if you can back it up and show your proficiency. So again, if you have access to things like LinkedIn Learning, which again, UMich students do, or anybody can do a Coursera course and get their certification, that helps us know, because it's really easy for somebody to put in like, I know about this program, or I know Java, and then you find out that they've touched one thing with it. Whereas if you can show that you have the certification, or if you're doing some kind of programming, make a GitHub page and put your program up there, it lets us really, it lets you show your stuff and show off. The other thing, just to keep yourself organized, put it on your calendar like a class. Just treat it like a regular class that you're taking. All right, Maddie, I will let you take it over from here.
Okay, so that was a lot of skills that lead into using some of these softwares that are really prevalent in research that I'm going to talk through a little bit here. And so you may have already written research papers in one of your classes. If not, you almost definitely will. And while writing a research paper, you will be required to utilize references and actually find other peer-reviewed articles, journal articles that are supporting whatever your topic is for these research papers. And so there's a couple different really common, there's a bunch of different search engines to find these kinds of articles, but these are a couple common ones that we utilize a lot in our research sphere. PubMed, PsycInfo, Web of Science are some of the more specific ones, and then Google Scholar is a great one. And these, you can type in your specific research interests and it'll pop up with a search engine, search results of papers that might likely match whatever you're looking for. And what's really nice about these, in conjunction with citation managers, which are these three softwares at the bottom, Zotero, Mendeley, and X9. I personally use Zotero, but what's really nice about how Zotero and Mendeley specifically work, because they're both free and they both have extensions that you can add to your browser extensions, that if you're looking for papers, say through Google Scholar, and you have the Zotero extension installed in your Chrome page, which is what I use, and you find a paper, an article that you're interested in saving, you can click this little button right at the top of your browser that then saves that specific paper into whatever folder you might have made in Zotero. So it saves all of the citation information and oftentimes a PDF of the paper that you're trying to save, instead of having to save a bunch of links or download PDFs and put them into a folder. These citation managers are really, really helpful in storing all of these papers that you would likely be using for citations in your research article that then also populate as a bibliography at the end. So it takes out a lot of the nitty-gritty formatting work. You can choose your preferred format. Your APA 7 is the current one that we are using in psychology for the most part. And so it does a lot of the kind of grunt work of citation management for you, which is really nice, because that is often the worst part about writing a research paper. And what some professors get really stickler on, that can take off a lot more points than might seem reasonable. But letting these softwares kind of do some of the work for you are really helpful. And so if you've already utilized any of these potentially with a class paper that you can bring into a lab environment, that's really helpful. A lot of times, specifically in my lab, we'll have our research assistants doing background literature reviews for our research projects, either justifications for an experiment, or kind of setting up the introduction of a paper. And you could even be involved in writing a paper that way, of doing this background literature work and having all of these citations stored. So these are really helpful to sort of familiarize with, maybe in a class setting first, get familiar with Zotero and how they interact with the search engines. And then take that into a lab experience and sort of already have some of that set. And then, so that's some of the more like literature type related softwares. But as a lot of research entails is data analysis and collecting data of some sort. And so becoming pros at any of these softwares, Excel, any like stats programs, plotting programs are really, really helpful also to have some sort of experience or knowledge, even just a base familiarity, and being able to like grow your skills in these is really helpful. And so Excel, we've all probably had some exposure to Excel at a sort of basic level at least, but you can do a million things with Excel, and especially in a sort of business side. So there's a lot of business research too that goes on. There's a ton of industry experts that really are just so well versed in Excel wizards, as this says. And so things like additional skills like using macros are really helpful. And so macros is almost like writing a programming script. If you are familiar with that, you can automate certain tasks that maybe you use a lot of the time that you can have like in a separate Excel macros that then you can import into a bunch of different Excel sheets and sort of automate some tasks that you would do a lot of times. Pivot tables are really helpful in creating tables that describe basic statistics and basic information about your data. Formulas you can use to create new variables, create new fields out of existing data, which is really helpful. Descriptive statistics, kind of just basic stats, they're quick stats, and then charting. So if you can do, there's some basic plotting and charting, sort of just click and plug and chug buttons that you can do with Excel and create some nice graphs just on the fly, which is really helpful. Beyond Excel, there's a lot of other statistics softwares that we are commonly using here in psychology. I spend most of my life in R, but here we've got R, JASP, and SPSS are also common ones. R and JASP are really nice because they're both free and open source. SPSS does require at least some sort of license. I think Michigan has one, so maybe look into, for a lot of these programs, if they're not free, look into whether your school or even lab might have a license for some of these potentially more expensive programs. But R and JASP, R specifically, again, that's my background a little bit, but if you're good at Googling, and again, that is a skill to learn, frankly, is how to Google what you're trying to do in a specific program. And so this extends to like almost anything that you would need to do within the research field, especially data analysis. If you don't know how to do it, knowing how to Google that task in said program is really helpful. And R is great because there's a ton of documentation online about how to use certain functions, how to use certain packages. Likely somebody on the internet has already asked your question also, and hopefully gotten an answer from somebody else. Sometimes you'll find your exact question that doesn't have an answer yet, and it's a little insanity inducing, but there's like routes to get to an answer on the internet more often than not. So R is a really good one to know coming into a research lab. And a lot of times grad programs will also expand upon our knowledge with the stats classes. So here our stats class is mostly based in R, which provides a really good base for just learning other programming languages in general, which is really helpful. And there it says ask Google. For survey administration and actually like collecting that data in the beginning, a lot of these different softwares are really, really helpful. So here, for most areas except biopsych, these Qualtrics can be in REDCap can both be utilized to build online surveys, administer the surveys through links that you can just distribute. And Qualtrics specifically, again, is what I think most of us work with here, is really, there's a lot of structure and kind of flow you can build into these surveys to get really cool, complex survey machines that you can then administer. Prolific and MTurk are really helpful recruiting platforms that especially took off during the pandemic. We turned a lot of our research online. So we started collecting a lot of online participants through Prolific and MTurk that you can put your study online. Maybe it's a link from Qualtrics, you put your survey out, and you can have a ton of data collected within 24 hours and then pay them through Prolific or MTurk, which is super, super nice and totally beats like a semester's worth of data collection if you can do it in like a couple hours, which is awesome. Pavlovia here goes with PsychoPy at the bottom, but Pavlovia is a online experiment sort of host platform, server, if you will, that can house these specifically PsychoPy experiments that you can create a task, or I think surveys also potentially, through this PsychoPy program that utilizes some Python. It can utilize JavaScript, but it also has a GUI, so a system that you can click and drag, like builder, bring in different features of an experiment through kind of drag and drop mechanisms as well. So that's at the bottom here, PsychoPy, and that can also be utilized as Psych Toolbox and ePrime, or all of these different sort of platforms to design behavioral experiments. But then MATLAB and Python can also be used for sort of creating more technical experiment systems. So if you ever were to get involved in neuroscience research, so using sort of like fMRIs or EEG machines, a lot of that is done through MATLAB and then analyzed through Python. So that's just a kind of broad overview of a lot of these different software platforms that are useful in collecting data, analyzing data, and administering experiments and surveys.
Sorry, somebody join us just as we get in here. So we actually did a survey in 2020 to help people find out what kinds of skills would be useful. So we asked our faculty, grad students, postdocs, and lab managers and staff which software they used for data management and analysis, experiment or survey creation, or for any other thing. And so just to give you an idea for those of you who aren't familiar with some of our areas here. So CCN is cognition and cognitive neuroscience, CPEP is combined program in education and psychology, PS&C is personality and social context, and I think the other ones we have spelled out, but if not, I'll try to name them here. So we got pretty good response from all of the areas. And as you can see, Excel is just huge for everybody. So, if you're not sure what you want to do and you're going to pick only one thing, like Excel is really not a bad place to start. And I think especially as an undergrad RA, a lot of times you'll be working with that for initial data entry. As Maddie was saying, the other two big ones are R and SPSS, and you can see like there's some difference depending on which area, kind of which things people tend to gravitate towards. For experiment survey collection, again, unless you want to go into biopsych, like rats aren't very good at taking Qualtrics surveys, but pretty much everybody else uses that. So again, if you're only going to pick one, then I would say Qualtrics is a useful one. Otherwise, MATLAB and Python are ones that are becoming increasingly popular. And in general, build your skills. Also, even once you get into a lab, don't stop. So a lot of times, what I will do if in my lab is if we have extra bandwidth for people, I will actually give them the opportunity after they've been in the lab for a semester or two to say like, okay, let's take 2 hours of your scheduled lab time and pick a skill that you want to learn, and you set some goals for yourself for how you're going to get there, and tell me what you're going to, what's your product going to be at the end of the semester to show me that you learned this skill. because that's good for you, and it's also good for us in the lab because now you can actually do more. So almost all faculty are terrible about maintaining their websites. So if that's something that you're interested in, we probably will be supportive of that, because then you can take over that function. Other coding, again, I'm getting a lot of emails, not just for undergraduate research assistants, but right now also for people applying to graduate school, and like somebody who stands out in terms of knowing a lot of R, knowing a lot of programming, like they really stand out. Other things you can do, IRB and IACUC, that's helpful. You'll probably not have to use that too much until you're starting your own projects. For those of you who are a little bit more advanced, or if you're really interested in neuroimaging, there are also online training courses for that, including Andy's Brain Book. It will literally walk you through downloading a data set and analyzing it. If you have any particular language skills or experience with special populations, so if you're interested in development and you've worked with kids before, like definitely put that onto your CV. And think about what you can do in your coursework and readings to guide towards the kind of career and the kinds of positions that you want to pick up. The other thing you can do is, just demonstrate responsibility and interest in your volunteer work. So again, I don't have a ton of openings in my lab right now, but I, am trying to think of some ways to create some for people. And, one of the things that really stands out about a couple of people is like, they've taken a lot of leadership in their volunteer or their student organizations. And I'm like, okay, well, if you can do that, then you're probably a pretty organized person, and maybe we can put you in charge of some organizational activities here in the lab. So, use those opportunities, and then don't be afraid to bring them up and advertise them for yourself as you're doing it. So just, final thoughts with this, again, it is a little bit of a tough environment. Again, I do want to emphasize, like in the winter semester, it can be especially tough to find a position. So if you find yourself in that spot where somebody says, I don't have any openings right now, ask, can I join into your lab meetings? Like find a way to get associated with the lab, so that way you're in the front of their minds when they do have a position open. And use this as an opportunity to be thoughtful. Like don't just jump into the first thing that's available, but think about what kind of skills do I want to craft for myself. And if I can't do it in a lab right now, let me use this time and pick up those skills on my own, so that way when there is a position open, I'm really ready to take the best advantage of it. And with that, thank you all so much for your time, and any questions or comments. Oh, I think I see, okay, a couple in the chat. Oh, just some thank yous. All right, if there aren't any questions, we'll just remind you. So next time we're actually going to talk about applying to research opportunities. So giving you some more templates for those, thinking about what kinds of things to highlight in your applications, and also the things you want to avoid putting into those kinds of applications. And that is it for today. All right, thank you all.